Okay, so this is your lesson on Descartes' first meditation. Now, it's based on the content in pages 19 to 23 of your Knowledge and Doubt booklets. However, we will not be doing the brain in the vat analogy, so don't worry about that. How this is going to work is I am going to basically give you an online lecture which will go on for as long as we need to get through the content. I should expect it shouldn't be much longer than 20 minutes. There are lots of different ways in which you can use this video to help your learning. First of all, I'm going to put the transcript, so exactly what I say, up onto Microsoft Teams, and it's going to take the form of a Word document. And you can either read along to the video, or you could maybe watch the video and do it in chunks, or you could use both to help further your learning. So your title is Meditation 1. Your learning intentions are to understand the content of the first meditation and to describe the arguments put forward by Descartes. Your success criteria, which you don't have to write down, is to evaluate whether or not Descartes was successful in destroying all knowledge. So, the aim and the method of meditation 1. Descartes' aim in the first meditation is basically that he must show how our foundations of knowledge are problematic. Our senses are wrong. So he's trying to argue that our senses, which are what we tend to base our knowledge on, so for example, I feel that it's warm, so I judge it to be warm. He believes that our senses are wrong. His method is as follows. He shows how the senses are wrong in 3, technically 4 waves. And these 4 waves are the unreliability of the senses, the dream argument, the deceiving God argument, and the evil demon. What I'm going to get you to do is in your jotters, I would like you to split your page into 4 and put each of the waves in a section. So the senses in one section, the dream awake argument in another, the deceiving God argument in another, and the malicious demon and the evil genius in another. And what I want you to do is, as you learn about them, to take detailed notes on them. Now, to start with, we need to think about foundational beliefs. So remember that a foundational belief is one which is both certain and one which we can build upon it other certain beliefs. This is what Descartes is looking for, a foundation on which to build more knowledge. In epistemology, which is a study of knowledge, foundational beliefs must be certain. If there's any doubt, then it is, for Descartes, a false belief. So Descartes must have foundational beliefs which are absolutely certain, so he can then start to base his future knowledge and beliefs on them. So remember to make that 4-sectioned table in your page. What's going to follow now is basically the lecture. Take notes either after you've watched a video or in chunks. So, wave 1, the unreliability of the senses. Descartes begins his strategy by recognizing one of the first principles upon which much of his knowledge is founded. He points out that many of the beliefs he has taken to be completely reliable come from his senses. Whilst this has been the case, he also considers the fact that his senses have been shown to deceive him. For this reason, he suggests he might be wise not to trust them completely. And Descartes says, but from time to time, I have found that the senses deceive, and it is prudent never to trust completely those who have deceived us even once. Descartes uses the example of how large objects, if seen from a distance, are in fact very small to our eyes. He quickly points out that if it is only one particular kind of sense experience that appears to regularly cause error, then maybe it's only this type of sense experience that should be thrown out. So, for example, if our sight is always deceiving us or deceives us often, maybe we should start thinking about doubting them. Despite his senses deceiving him, there are many other beliefs based on his senses that he finds impossible to deny. For example, he says, I am sat here, sitting by the fire, wearing a winter dressing gown, holding this piece of paper in my hands, and so on. In this way, he is dismissing the possibility that all sense experience should be completely doubted. So that's the end of wave one. What he's trying to do is try and show that his senses are unreliable. However, he says at the end, basically, well, okay, so there are some bits of information that I get from the senses that I can doubt. However, there's some that seem impossible to deny. So in his first wave, he hasn't succeeded just yet in basically doubting everything. That's what he's trying to do. Yeah, he's trying to doubt all of his beliefs to find a foundation. So far, he's said that his senses are unreliable, but he hasn't been able to doubt everything because there are some beliefs that he gets from his senses that he finds impossible to deny. So that is wave one. Let's go on to wave two. So wave two is the dream argument. Having just dismissed the doubts regarding most sense experience, Descartes then moves on to a more extreme concern. He realizes that when he is asleep, his dreams are in many ways like the waking delusions of a madman. He realizes that when he is dreaming, his grasp of what is real is no more certain at that moment than if he were awake and insane. What Descartes has realized is that there are some dreams that are so completely like everyday life that this poses a very real problem. Descartes points out that his waking experience seems very distinct, perhaps vivid is the right word here, and so perhaps this could give him a reason to be certain of his wakefulness. However, he then questions this when remembering that he has thought very, very similar thoughts in his sleep, and thus he supposes that there are no clear signs by which it is possible to tell when you are awake rather than asleep. So Descartes says, as I think about this more carefully, I see plainly that there are never any sure signs by means of which being awake can be distinguished from being asleep. However, despite the fact that Descartes can't distinguish between dreaming and being awake, he states that even dreams seem to be based on things which are real. And he says, nonetheless, it must surely be admitted that the visions which come in sleep are like paintings which must have been fashioned in the likeness of things that are real, and hence that there are at least three general kinds of things: eyes, head, hands, and a body as a whole are things which are not imaginary but are real and exist. If it is possible that he could be dreaming now, then the things his senses seem to be telling him about the immediate world may not be true. However, Descartes believes that certain concepts that make up our dreaming experiences remain real, even if we are dreaming. Using the analogy of the painter who needs to use colors to create their paintings, things such as matter, extension, shape, quantity, size, time, and place, must all be real because our dreams are based on these things. From this, Descartes comes to conclude that subjects like physics, astronomy, and medicine, which depend on studying concepts which could be drawn together using our imagination as part of our dreams, cannot be reliable. However, we may be able to put our faith in subjects which deal with concepts which survive the dream argument in their most basic form, such as geometry, which deals with numbers and shape. He emphasizes this point by stating, whether I am awake or asleep, 2 and 3 added together are 5, and a square has no more than 4 sides. So even if he is dreaming, Descartes supposes that there are some basic truths that he cannot doubt. So that's the end of wave 2, which is the dream argument. So remember, Descartes is trying to tear down all of his beliefs. And what he's basically said here is that there aren't any ways, he believes, in which he can tell the difference between being awake and being in a dream. However, he still isn't able to doubt to doubt everything, because he believes that his dreams are based on things which must be real. So, for example, he says, well, in his dream, 2 and 3 together are 5. So even though he can't tell the difference between dreaming and being awake, there are still things which he still believes because they apply both in the real world and in his dreams. His dreams must be based on something real. So he can't doubt some of his beliefs because his dreams seem to be based on something real. So that's wave 2. So still, he hasn't been able to doubt everything that he believes. So let's have a look at the next wave. Wave 3 is the deceiving God argument. So, having come to his provisional conclusion that there are some truths which he cannot doubt, even if he is dreaming, Descartes continues his meditation to consider the idea he has of God. He claims to have a belief in an all-powerful God who made him. In considering this idea, Descartes realizes that it's possible that an all-powerful God could make it seem to him that there were such things as sky, earth, size, shape, etc., when in fact there were no such things. So he asks the question, how do I know that God has not brought it about that I too go wrong every time I add 2 and 3 or count the sides of a square? Therefore, if there is an all-powerful God, even the basic principles that held firm after the dream argument could now be uncertain. Descartes considers a possibility that deception might go against God's good nature. However, he rejects this idea because he argues that if we think such complete deception is inconsistent with the goodness of God, then we should also consider any deception at all to be inconsistent with his goodness, and that because of this, we could argue that we are never being deceived. However, Descartes recognizes that we are sometimes deceived by our senses and accepts that God's goodness could be compatible with him deceiving everyone. In this way, Descartes says it may be possible that an all-powerful, all-good God could deceive him about the principles which he believed to be true even after the dream argument. Descartes defends his belief in God by saying that if there is no God, then we might think it's more likely that we're being completely deceived. Other beliefs in place of God, such as fate or chance, are less powerful explanations for why we exist than an all-powerful being like God. At this point, Descartes concludes that there is not a single belief that he previously held to be true that he can't doubt. That is, all of his previous beliefs may be false. So, what we've got here is Descartes finally being able to doubt all of his beliefs. The reason why this is because God, who is all-powerful, could be deceiving him. So if an all-powerful God is deceiving him, then that means that all of his beliefs must surely be false. So finally, we've got to the point where Descartes believes that his beliefs are false. So let's now look at wave 4, which is the malicious or evil demon. Descartes realizes that even despite having considered all his concerns in his former beliefs, it's going to be very difficult for him to put aside his trust in them. This is because he has been in such a habit of accepting them to be true. So basically what he's saying here is he realizes now that his beliefs are all false, or they could be false. However, it's very difficult for him to let go of them because he's established them as being very likely to be true out of habit. So, for example, if we see the sun rising at the start of a day, we believe that this is what's actually happening. Therefore, he says that it would be best if he tries to pretend to himself that his former beliefs are not uncertain, but are false. This will stop him from falling back into bad habits and trusting in beliefs that may not be trustworthy. So, how is Descartes going to do this? So, this is how Descartes says what he's going to do. I will suppose, therefore, that not God, who is supremely good and the source of truth, but rather some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. So this is what Descartes says he's going to do. So to help him pretend that all his previously held beliefs are false, he imagines that there be a being as powerful as God, but evil instead of good, who's trying to trick him into believing things that aren't true. It's worth noting that Descartes particularly focuses on the demon deceiving him about the nature of the world, which is the stuff he learns through sense experience. I shall think that the sky, the earth, colours, shapes, sounds, and all external things are merely the delusions of dreams which he has devised to ensnare my judgment. He then concludes that even if he is unable to get to certain truths that he is seeking, he will at least not believe things which are not true. He says, I shall at least resolutely guard against assenting to any falsehoods, so that any deceiver, however powerful and cunning he may be, will be unable to impose on me in the slightest degree. So, this is basically now the end of the first meditation. So what he's going to do is he's now accepted that there could be a God that's deceiving him. But what he's going to do in the second meditation, which is what we're going to look at next week, is he's going to imagine that there's an evil demon who is deceiving him. And what he's going to do is to basically say that all of his beliefs are false in the next meditation, to try and then find something that he is certain that the demon can't be deceiving him of. So, before we go on to the analysis and evaluation section, make sure that you've taken notes on the 4 waves of the first meditation. Basically, what he's trying to do is try to show that his senses are false, that they are flawed. And how he then tries to show it is by showing that the senses are unreliable. He then tries to look at the dream argument and then looks at the deceiving God argument. And basically what he does is, this is his process. He starts by saying, well, okay, our senses might be flawed, but there are some things which still I find very difficult to doubt because it seems so real. He then jumps to the dream argument and he says, well, actually, there could be, so there is an issue telling the difference between dreaming and being awake, but still dreams must be based on something real. So therefore, I can't doubt everything in my dreams. So far, up until the end of the second wave, he isn't able to doubt all of his beliefs. In the third wave, he basically then comes to the conclusion that there could be a God deceiving him. And based on this, he can then call his beliefs into doubt. In the fourth wave, which is technically just an extension of the deceiving God argument, Descartes says what he's going to do in the second meditation, which it's basically pretend that an evil demon is deceiving him. And through doing that, he then tries to find one thing at least of which he can be certain the demon isn't deceiving him on. And what that turns out to be is his cogito, which we'll learn about next week. So let's have a look now at the analysis and evaluation. So these are the points which you're going to discuss in your essays and also in your National 5 answers. So I'm going to talk you through each of these strengths and weaknesses. So first of all, Descartes' method of doubt. One thing that can be said about Descartes' approach is that he is rigorous in his strategy. His method serves as a very successful destructive phase. He sets out to undermine all his beliefs, even those that he puts most faith in, and he has managed to undermine them, and his use of the imaginary malicious demon will help him to not just doubt these beliefs, but to consider them completely false. So this is a strength of Descartes' first meditation. But let's think about some of the weaknesses. So what if there are no foundational beliefs? A genuine concern for Descartes is the risk that foundationalism, which is the belief that there are foundational beliefs on which all others are built upon, is not the right approach to knowledge. Descartes has set out to uncover some absolute truths on which he can rebuild his whole system of beliefs. If there are no absolutely certain foundational truths, then his project is going to fail. Alternative theories of knowledge, such as coherentism, suggest our knowledge could be justified in a web of beliefs which support each other in a complex system. So there's no justified beliefs then. The second criticism, but the third analysis and evaluation point, is, was Descartes sincere? Another criticism of Descartes is that he set out knowing what he intended to prove. If this is true, then perhaps he is not sincerely engaged with his own method and has simply used it as a tool to present his own viewpoint. This could be a fallacy of confirmation bias, thinking to arguments and action. For Descartes' method to be completely effective, then surely it's reasonable to expect Descartes to genuinely destroy all his opinions. It could be argued that he only ever pretended to doubt key beliefs like his conviction that God exists. And finally, and this one's particularly important for National 5, but also for higher when you're considering your essays, is problems with the dream argument. So, Descartes suggested that he regularly mistook the experience of dreaming for reality. In other words, he seemed to be saying that when we are asleep, we have no way of distinguishing sleep from reality. Most people can understand these comments, as most of us have experienced the sensation of waking up and for a moment or two not knowing whether we are still dreaming. However, it doesn't take long for us to realize that we are actually awake. It does appear that we mistake dreaming for consciousness when we are asleep and dreaming. However, do we necessarily make the same mistake when we're awake? When we're asleep, we can't clearly distinguish wakefulness from sleep. However, when we are awake, we do seem to be able to check easily. It has been argued then that Descartes seems to have made a logical error. He takes this apparently true proposition, when I'm dreaming, I regularly mistakenly assume that this experience is real, and then moves on to say, I cannot ever tell the difference between dream experience and conscious experience. So this means that his conclusion that he can't tell whether he is asleep now isn't necessarily the case. So just because he sometimes can't tell the difference between dreaming and awake doesn't mean that he can never tell the difference between being awake and dreaming. Some also argue that Descartes doesn't need the dream argument at all, as the nature of his doubts means that the deceiving God argument will undermine his sense experience completely, even if the dream argument isn't up to the task. However, there is some concern with this, as Descartes presented the dream argument as a way to particularly undermine our trust in sense experience. A priori truths still survived, so that's truths through reason, but a posteriori truths, so things that we get through experience, didn't. Descartes was, therefore, using his argument to begin his case for rationalism being superior to empiricism. Even if these criticisms are true, however, they don't really affect the principles which he's trying to establish. So, you will get, or you will already have, everything that I've just said in the form of the lecture, in the form of a Word document. What you need to do is make sure that you have got notes on the 4 waves and the analysis and evaluation points. Once you've done that, I want you to complete these past paper questions. And I want you to complete these in a Word document so that I can then mark them. So pause the video and complete these past paper questions. Use your books, use the notes which I've given you, use this video. These are past paper questions which are very relevant to the first meditation, or they are relevant to the first meditation. Submit them as a Word document and submit your work, a photograph of your work, as evidence that you've done this week's lesson. I understand that this is a lot of work. However, when it's done, and we need to get the course done. So make sure that you get all of this done and message me if you need any support. You know I'm more than happy to do that. For now, wishing you all the best, and we'll see you next week's lesson on the second meditation.